Hello and welcome to the new episode of Who Gives a Folk, the channel that brings you TV and films that are slightly different to the everyday. Today I want to talk about 1964's film, It Happened Here. This film was about 8-9 years in the making, so we can look at the roots of it lying in about 1955. Now, it's a World War II film, but the premise is that the Nazis invaded England after Dunkirk and took over. It's one of those what ifs, but this has a whole lot more going on than just an alternate world, an alternate universe theory. There is some rich moral ambiguity that underpins this, that challenges the viewer. So imagine the Nazis on the streets of London, in control, shops waving Nazi flags. This is the world we could have been in. So, it happened here. Even the production of this film is layered with intrigue. As I say, it was filmed over 8 years. It was filmed using borrowed equipment, including some equipment from Stanley Kubrick. Most of the actors are volunteers. The fascists, a lot of them are played by members of the British Union of Fascists or ex-members of the British Union of Fascists. There are genuine ex-SS actors playing the Germans. This is all in a time when the realities of that war were still very raw, still very with people. The production, there's some issues with the sound, especially early on, which makes some of the dialogue difficult to see. But the filming for this level of film is outstanding. There are some, it's in black and white, and it uses that black and white imagery to perfection in places. It's gritty, it's like documentary footage. So the production really grips you, really draws you into the film. And it's probably for next to nothing. There were 900 actors involved in the production, nearly all of them volunteers, amateurs, people just keen to be part of it. So, not your normal production, not your normal film. It happened here. Hell of a lot going on. I also like the way they didn't bother to put a soundtrack to it. There's no annoying music to convey the director's idea of emotion. You're left facing your own emotions, your own responses to what's happening. And that's what drives this film. So the story is fairly straightforward. It starts off in a rural area, around a rural town near Salisbury. They're being evacuated because of resistance to the fascist government. There is, basically they're closing the road to Gloucester down. So they're evacuating people to London. Opposite of what actually happened in the real war, they're evacuating people to London, where they are able to control, where the fascists are able to control people easier. They have boots on the ground, literally. And the main character is a woman called Pauline Murray, played by an actress called Pauline Murray. That, again, real world, alternative world being brought into collision there. And she's one of the evacuees, and she goes through a journey. She's resistant to the government, a fascist government, but she sees what the collaborators do. They kill a number of her friends. She's not keen to be part of the fascist organization, but finds it impossible to stay out of their clutches, sees things that the government are doing. She's not happy about it. It's this moral dilemma that challenges you and says to you, what would you have done? So it's the story of Pauline, a nurse, and how she deals with the very real issues facing somebody in an occupied country. And that story, that moral ambiguity, is what's there throughout the entire film. You see Nazi soldiers on the streets of London. It's like when you saw the Daleks in Dalek Invasion of Earth, patrolling across the bridges. This is what you see in this film. It's the shops are showing Nazi insignia. The posters on the wall are about Nazi propaganda. Everybody is slowly trying to come to terms with what's happened in their own way. The collaborators, nobody is good in this film. Nobody comes out of it well. The collaborators look weak. But you also find yourself asking, what would I have done in that situation? You can see how people get worn down. You can see how people are being drawn into this fascist world. There's some people who like it, who say, well, you've got to euthanize because it's the best way for the society. And you've got the people who are forced into it but still carry resentment. And then you've got the resistance that are also shown not in a particularly good way. There's nobody heroic in this program, in this film. Nothing is glamorized. It's all shown as messy, as failed people, as complex. There are no easy answers given here. This is not this is how we fought the Nazi government and won. This is about, what would you do? What would your neighbours do? What would it take for you to fight back? Really, really does shove that moral ambiguity and say to you, where would you have drawn the line? What could you have turned a blind eye to? Where would you have been at the end? And that, in its own way, is more horrific than 1,000 slasher films, 1,000 gore fests, because this is, what would your neighborhood do? What would your community do? What would you do? And remember, it was released just 20 years after the war, but started being filmed barely 10 years after the war. These were things that people lived with in the 60s. The ghost of that lived with them. And here is where we actually, we turn to the hauntology of this film. It's a film where it's an alternative reality. It's a lost ghost of a future past that never occurred. Thank God it never happened. But that possibility, that defeated future, that lived with people in the 60s. There were collaborators, there were people who were sympathizers, and they were still walking the streets in the 60s. There were people who thought maybe it would have been better if it had been different. So this must have been a really, really raw feeling for a lot of people when it came out. And maybe that's why it was quietly forgotten. Maybe that's why we don't know much about it. Maybe that's why people don't like to actually think about things. So that's, the hauntology aspect of this film. It's a lost future, a past that never occurred, but it so easily could have. On the continent, in places, it did happen. In one part of Britain, it happened, Guernsey. This is not a fantasy. This is a very real, what could have happened if it happened here. There's also a folk drama element of this, the drama of the outsiders coming in, imposing a whole new way of thinking on people, and how people dealt with that, how they dealt with these new demands, these new fascist, national socialist concepts, how they resisted and how some didn't. And it is in some ways the ultimate outsider takeover. When your government, your institutions, everything tells you your old ways are wrong and now you've got to follow the new ways. And worse than that, they pretend that the new ways were the old ways anyway. They refer back in the fascist broadcasts, they refer back to a time when Germany and Englishmen stood side by side, as if that's the way it always should have been. It's a very good representation of the way that the Nazis played with folk pasts, folk traditions, and used them to generate their own folk tradition for the future. You see that happening here in this film. So I hope I haven't given too much away. I try to avoid any spoilers here. It is a great film for watching when you've got time to watch it. You don't want to watch it if you want to have a good time. It's not a happy film, but it does ask you questions. Questions that may be relevant, particularly in the modern day and our modern time, when there's a lot of moral ambiguity about all of our politics. I think it's a film that's worth digging out, having a watch, and having to ask yourself a few questions. If you've liked this film, please press like and subscribe. Until next time, take care and watch out for the Nazis.